It took more than 25 years, but the Ghostbusters franchise returned to movie screens in 2016, with a female cast and director Paul Feig. The internet reacted in a calm and adult manner, as you'd expect. Now that the fires have died down, let's take another look. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Virgo, avid skier, glutenful, and 100% jazzed to be meeting you.
I don't even remember that line, but okay.
Neither do I, but it's on the quotes list on IMDb, so I'm taking it.
This is a movie podcast. We get together and we talk about a movie. We are working through the Ghostbusters franchise because we're building up to the new one. We did Ghostbusters 1 and 2 already. This is the third film in the series, a huge leap after 1989's Ghostbusters 2 with this reboot of Ghostbusters 2016. Although they have tried to stealthily slip in a subtitle over time where it's called Ghostbusters Answer the Call, which doesn't sound very good, but that's how they've tried to differentiate it on some, storefronts and streaming services, things like that. So
yep.
Just be aware of that in case you see that. That's what that is. Just.
It feels like, I mean, I know that it's worldwide, but it feels like one of those ones where it's like, when it's brought into Japan or something like that, and they, for some reason, the localization team's like, oh no, we need a subtitle. It just sounds like that kind of subtitle. Like nothing that has to actually do with the movie itself. Yeah.
It's also one of those lazy things where you just start picking subtitles from key phrases that were already important, but they don't necessarily relate to the movie you've made itself. Like, it'd be, for example, and to be fair, they haven't done this with the other ones, but it'd be like if you got more movies and it'd be like, Ghostbusters, bustin' makes me feel good, or Ghostbusters, I ain't afraid of no ghosts, Ghostbusters, who you gonna call? Like, it'd be like, it's kind of like that.
Ghostbusters, I got slimed.
Yeah, you can just start lifting quotes from earlier on. We'll start spoiler-free, of course, as we always do. And before we get started here, I'll just say, if you are enjoying the show and you're on YouTube, hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do. More people will find us. So hit the button. It's free. It's easy. And of course, we do offer bonus shows monthly. Me and David do 2 specifically that go out every month on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. I'll tell you more about those at the end of the show, but we'll get into it. And this is a little daunting to get into this one. Although,
yes,
the time separation does help a little bit because it's 8 years old now. But when this movie came out, it was very tough to discuss with any kind of like well-intentions or nuance, because the reaction to it from a lot of assholes was so toxic and so sexist that if you said anything negative about it, it felt like, oh no, I'm going to be lumped in with, a very particular type of, incel, basically. And it was a really weird line to navigate, because there was also this sort of like almost counter to that. There was a group of people who wanted to really defend it because of the toxicity, but at the same time that almost felt like, and don't get me wrong, that's by far the better of the two sides there, but it also creates a problem where it's like, oh, we're having to praise everything and say, oh, this is all great for this reason and that reason, when I don't really know if that's true. Like, I think what we're here to do today is to praise it or
critique it.
Thank you. That's the opposite. On its own merits as a movie, on its own, discuss what works, what doesn't, and get into it.
Yeah, so. It's definitely a thing of, as soon as you hit public forums, as soon as you hit any sort of social media, nuance just dies. You have to fall into an extreme of, is it awesome, is it not? And it's not helpful to anybody, honestly. It's as soon as you get it into a, like, that's always been my critique of rating scales that are strictly just like thumbs up, thumbs down, because there's so much more to it than can ever be described, but with just a single binary choice,
Oh, for sure, yeah. Obviously there was a lot of stories leading up to this one coming out, because it was the first Ghostbusters movie in a long time, but the big talking point, of course, with the toxic side of things was, oh, it's 4 women this time, we're doing the all-lady Ghostbusters, and that made a lot of people upset for some reason.
Yeah.
So, I think the bigger thing, though, if you were a big fan of Ghostbusters at the time, was more the idea that it's like, okay, we're doing all these new characters, that's fine, but we're doing a reboot where they're doing effectively the origin of this new team where the original Ghostbusters never existed. And I think there's multiple reasons to feel frustrated by that. One is that because we're going to repeat a lot of the beats of like them becoming Ghostbusters, so it effectively makes it a remake in a lot of ways. But two, if you do care about the mythology of Ghostbusters, then you're kind of maybe upset that it's scrapping everything, and now instead of moving forward with new ideas, we're perhaps just regurgitating and remixing things that already happened. And I think those are valid things to be concerned about.
Yeah, I think that I'm much more on the latter than the former, where, I mean, I was never heartfelt like Ghostbusters is everything to me. I think it's fun. I think it's good. I really do enjoy the first one a lot. But even just watching this one, I am like, good Lord, it didn't take me more than 10 minutes to really get super tired of the eyebrow wagging like, hey, remember this? Remember this thing from the original? We're not going to call it out. We're not going to say it directly, but like, remember that? And I'm like, all right, yeah, movie, you did it. You brought back. But if you wanted to do the original so badly, why didn't you do the original?
It's funny, actually, because Afterlife, which we'll do next time, is a lot more fresher in my mind just because it's pretty new still. It's only a couple of years old. And one of the big complaints I have with that is how much reverence it has as a nostalgia sequel. It's almost like they went so far in the opposite direction after this one that like they've went too far and it's now too saccharine and it's too loving of the original. Whereas this is kind of this weird thing where it doesn't want to be the original, but it still wants to reference so many things from it. Sometimes it even is making fun of the original in certain ways. Sometimes it's wanting to just put in these little references. And the final post-credit scene even, and I say that because the credits, like the opening titles, if you want to call them that, in the first half of the credits, even though they're not at the opening of the movie anymore, that's just a really common thing that happens now, is filled with scenes, right? It's weird to even say that any one of them is a mid-credit scene because it's just constantly doing scenes as the titles are playing. But there's a scene at the very, very end of the credits, which is basically just them saying, hey, if we get a sequel, which obviously isn't happening, if we get a sequel, we're going to do the plot of the first movie. I was like, why should I be excited for that?
I call those scenes Sony scenes. I call those scenes where it's just Sony's like, yeah, we know that this is gonna do great, and we know we've got a franchise coming out of it, so we're not even gonna bother hedging our bets. It's like, all right, thanks, Sony.
That was your Sinister Six setup in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yep.
Yeah. It kind of plays like it's based on a comic book or something, and you know, when you're making a Batman movie, you get to tease the Joker at the end, or you get to tease a villain that people know. But Ghostbusters isn't this thing that has tons of villains to pick from and lots of different things people are waiting to see adapted. It was one movie and a sequel. So to say, hey, we might do the villain from the first movie like next time is not exciting.
You know what I really would have respected is if they, instead of pulling from the first movie, they went into the TV show. They went into the animated show and pulled out like some ghost from there. And it's only the super hardcore fans that would have been like, oh my God, they're finally doing it.
I think the way it's constantly doing these sly references, and that's they're not even all sly, but all I'm really trying to indicate with that is that they're not in-universe references. They're just kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge references.
Right.
Is that it ends up feeling like a Ready Player One style thing, where your movie's just a bunch of references, but they don't even have weight in the world because they're just kind of like, hey, audience, we're being meta. And it's actually one of the things that I hate about a lot of modern movies that I'm really sick of, is movies being self-referential. And so much of the comedy in this is characters commenting and giving commentary as to what's happening. And hey, isn't this crazy that this is happening? I can't believe this thing just occurred. So much of the movie's that, and the fact that even the references are kind of in that vein as well is not something that appeals to me. So I guess we get into the general thoughts. I will say, going into the movie, even the original time, my big red flags for this movie were the names Paul Feig, who's the director, because I hadn't really liked anything he'd done before, and Melissa McCarthy, who I never found funny ever. Like, I don't like any of her movies.
That's fair. So, I mean, yeah, if you don't like the actors, that's fine. I mean, I think it was Bridesmaids. I could be wrong on that. It was literally over a decade ago. I thought that it was funny-ish. That's the thing. I think that there are scenes in that movie, and that's Melissa McCarthy, and I think Paul Feig may have actually directed that as well.
I think he did. I think I remember Kristen Wiig being kind of funny in that movie, and I think she was the main character even, which is probably to its benefit.
And there's a way that these jokes work in that movie where it's just this long form improv section. Basically, it's just them bouncing off each other for hours upon hours, and they take the best bits and they turn it into a movie. I think that can work. That's good in a lot of different scenarios, but I think the problem that I have with this movie is that style of humor. Not that it's there. I'm fine with it. And like when we were talking about Ghostbusters 1, I loved Bill Murray's improvs. I loved the fact that he had those little one-liners and whatnot. But it's that key there, the one-liners. This humor, which is stretched across all the characters, is let's take a one-liner and turn it into a 2-minute long conversation of just bouncing back and forth. And it's every single joke is in that format.
It's actually everything I hate about every Melissa McCarthy movie is that she'll do something. I remember trying to watch The Heat, which is the movie she did with Sandra Bullock, and there's a scene early on in that movie where she's a cop and the captain's angry at her and she's sitting in the chair across the desk. And I remember the joke being something like she's going to like flip out and get angry to sort of like almost flip the scene on its head and be like, oh, now the captain's kind of should be scared of her. I can't remember the exact context, but the point I'm trying to get at is there's a moment after the first little outburst where I'm like, okay, if you cut away now, I don't love the joke because I don't necessarily love her delivery, but I at least get what the joke is and I understand the point. But then the scene kept going for another minute or two and just constantly doing the same thing. And I feel like this movie has that problem where there's one joke early on that I think on paper is funny. But one of the things we said about Ghostbusters, the original, is that a lot of it we could see why it's really just the way that the specific actors are delivering the lines that are making some of the lines funny. It's not that the lines themselves are just good no matter what. And I was kind of getting the vibe in here where it felt like some of the characters were trying to do Venkman-like lines and they were kind of all falling flat for me. But there's a joke online early on in this movie, to get back to the point I was getting at there, which is there's a joke where someone says, oh, this guy came and spoke to me, and then the other character says, but that man's been dead for 10 years or something like that. And then that character walks into shot, and the joke is that he has a son with the same name. And I'm like, okay, on paper I can see how this joke is funny. You give the audience a second where everyone thinks they've seen a ghost and they've had a little twist, and then it's like, oh no, it's not that at all. It's just a misunderstanding. There's a joke there. I understand the joke. But the way the characters all start talking about it as soon as they think the ghost things happened, and then the way they like sort of, you know, when the other guy walks, says, well, clearly this is who I meant. Come on now. Like there's this running extra couple lines to every single thing, and sometimes it's even longer than that. And it always just kills any joke that I could have found funny in the first place.
I haven't watched a whole lot of Saturday Night Live, but I am aware, like I've seen enough sketches that are just posted to YouTube and whatnot that I'm aware of like what sort of modern SNL is, what it's kind of become. And it kind of feels like that, where if they have an idea for a sketch, a scene or something like that, it's just the one thing. And they will riff on that and they will extend it out as long as they need to extend it out for runtime. But it's not something that gets multiple passes. I mean, again, this movie is improv. Almost every single scene, it has a basic structure to it, but the gist of it, the jokes are improvs. And that is not good for like witty, quick banter. If you like the comedy of modern SNL, this movie may play fine to you. I have no idea on that, but like for me going into it, my sense of humor is very much dry, witty, exactly what Venkman was in the first movie.
I think the word you're using here is witty. That's something we said a lot when we talked about that first Ghostbusters. Yes. And I don't think there's anything in this movie I would describe as witty.
No, not at all. Because again, it's so difficult to do that in improv. Witty requires you to like sit and think on it, or you have to be one of the best of the best. I think Bill Murray is that best of the best in terms of getting that sort of
he's once in a
dry
lifetime
wit out there.
Yeah, he's exceptional who he is and what he does, and like there's no like, and he because even in the original Ghostbusters he stands out. He is the star of that movie because he is that way. And that's not to knock anyone else in that movie. I like most of them. I think they all add to the movie. But he's the one that sticks out because he's so good at that. Here, like, the comedy tends to be more, like I say, commentary on what's happening, right? Or constantly describing things and just kind of being self-referential with it. It's almost like they took the Slimer thing and just ran with it, because every single ghost in this movie covers people in slime if they get hit by them. So that's just like, there's like slime and there's ooze, and they just keep doing that. And then some of the humor is just really, really lowbrow, dumb stuff. And this is where I may get some flack, because I know people liked this when the movie came out, but Chris Hemsworth's character in this movie is trash, and I am going to die on this hill.
I feel like trash is too harsh. I think that he was put up in the same sort of like improv area as all of these people who did SNL for multiple seasons, who are actual like comedians. And I don't think that he quite had the chops to fill out that role. Like in the role that's written of, oh, he's the hunky secretary or whatever, that's fine. But as soon as you make him forced to like come up with lines on the fly and banter with these trained comedians, no, that's just not going to work out.
Like, I'm okay with the idea that you've got the hunky guy who's really dumb, but he is so dumb. The humor is just so unfunny to me, where he covers his eyes when he doesn't want to hear something. Like, just that's the level we're dealing with here. It's so low down. Because I get it. Like, honestly, again, on paper, the idea of Kristen Wiig's character having the hots for the dumb, hunky guy, and sort of almost flipping on the head the idea that Venkman was chasing after the ladies in the first movie, sort of flipping that. Because she's kind of the Venkman. They don't all one-to-one the characters, but you can kind of see parallels, you know, like...
Yeah.
You know, like, so to go through the four of them, like, Melissa McCarthy's character, Abby, is kind of the Ray for the most part. Not entirely, but for the most part.
She's very believing in it. She's already made up her mind ghosts do exist, and she's super eager to find some.
Kristen Wiig's Erin is kind of the Venkman in that she's the one that's the most like the leader, and that's when I say leader, I don't mean leader of the team. I mean leader of the cast. And
leader, and she starts out as like a skeptic as well.
Yeah, and she's also like a professor who's dragged into it, kind of thing. Although that said, her personality is very different from Venkman, like night and day different. Kate McKinnon's character, Holtzman, is very much the Egon. Again,
but like the bizarro Egon.
Yeah, own quirks and all that, but definitely the Egon. And then Leslie Jones is the one who comes in a little bit later, so naturally is kind of the Winston.
In more ways than one.
So it's just a... I feel like if you're going to do something different with new characters, then genuinely do something different. Forcing an Ecto 1 that doesn't look as good as the Ecto 1 is just such a weird, like, choice to me.
Let me throw this at you, because this is what I was thinking of this whole time, and it goes back to how all of the comedy is just that same kind of comedy. We made the point that every single character in the movie had their own, like, type of humor in Ghostbusters. Obviously, the witty one was Venkman, all that. Despite the fact that each of these characters are very wildly different in their personalities, everyone has their own backstory and they're decently well fleshed out, all of them talk the same. All of them make the same style of jokes, which is just the run-on sentences and the bantering back and forth. There isn't a feel of like Egon's dry, like monotonous tone to his jokes. You don't have Ray's like peppy, like, oh yeah, this is great sort of thing. You don't have the blue collar from Winston. It's all SNL. That's it, the whole way through.
Which, actually, another just point on this is that they never shut up.
They never do. No.
And obviously, like, Ghostbusters itself is not exactly a movie with long, quiet stretches. It's a dialogue-heavy movie, but I think of a moment in the library at the start of the movie when the three of them are down there, right? And there's that moment where Peter just says, "Have you seen anything like this?" And he turns slowly to Ray, who just silently shakes his head. He turns over to Egon, and he silently shakes his head. I can't imagine this movie having a single moment like that, because they can't stop. There's a moment where when they're doing their first big ghostbusting thing at like a rock concert, there's a bit where it's just Leslie Jones running down a hall running from a ghost, or looking for a ghost and then running, but the entire time she's like just talking about stuff to herself. Yeah, she's
doing a bit.
The whole time, that's just all it is. And all I could think was the equivalent to this, because the structure of the movie is very similar to the original Ghostbusters. The equivalent to this is when they're in the hotel in Ghostbusters and they're like looking for Slimer and they're going down all the halls and stuff. And just remember, look, the movie actually tried to have, I mean, obviously it's still a comedy, but it still had relative tension. It was still trying to build excitement into getting to the ghost and to doing this stuff. And I think one of the big problems with this movie is that it never does that. And even just from like a macro sense, looking at the movie as a whole, its sense of momentum is absolute trash. Like, it never, like, it always kind of like slows back down again. It feels like they go back to the base. And we've not mentioned this yet, but for some reason this movie has like 7 or 8 scenes of people just dancing and very little purpose to why they're dancing, all and just as something you can do when you're improving, I guess.
Okay, so I do want to clear one thing up real quick. Yeah. There are 2 versions of this movie.
Oh, I'm glad you brought this up, because I've got something to say about this too.
All right, so there are 2 versions of this movie. One's just shy of 2 hours. The other one's about 15 minutes longer. I'm assuming we both watched the shorter version.
I wish I could say yes.
Oh, Peter. No.
It was not an intentional decision. I was in...
Oh, no.
I was too late by the time I realized my error. And I saw the slightly longer cut. So at some point I might say something and you'll be like, I don't remember that. That'll be why.
I did look up the differences. I did want to see what was separated between the two. So I am at least mildly aware of what's going on, which is essentially you got about 85% more of Kristen Wiig's background than I got.
I didn't remember it well enough to know for sure everything that was added, but there was 2 things that I was sure of. One was a sort of extra bit of subplot of Wiig's backstory, which I only even realized it was added because like there's a thing later on. I'm like, I don't remember her doing this thing, and so I think I realized that most of that subplot was probably new. And I think there's probably the worst joke with Chris Hemsworth's character right towards the end of the movie. I don't think was in the original cut based on memory, but but we'll find out when we get to that point going through it. You can tell me if you saw that part or not.
I'll do my best.
So. Yeah, I unfortunately watched the longer cut. What's so funny though is because there's scenes like peppered throughout the credits. Like technically when the credits start, there's actually like 15 minutes of the movie still left because there's so many scenes stretching that out. But it's paced poorly and it doesn't have the same story drive. And then I guess just as a broad critique as well, the villain is like paper thin. Yeah. He's nothing. Like, you can make any complaints you want about how some stuff doesn't make sense with Vigo's plot in 2, but Vigo has a character. He's got presence. Like, you remember him. Like,
I think that was my biggest problem with I'm already blanking on his name, and we just did this review. The dude who got Vigo going.
Janos.
Janos, that's it. Janos, like, he had his problems as a character, whatnot, but the main thing was that he was not the focus. The focus was the ghost, you know?
Yes.
And I think that this movie, it does have basically a human primary villain to an extent. We won't spoil that yet, but it's just, I don't know. For me, having a human directly being the one pulling all the shots here just takes away so much from the Ghostbusters aspect of it. I feel like it should always be this huge thing behind the veil that they're just kind of figuring out as they go along.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily just dead set against the idea of a human being the one who's caused whatever the ghostly stuff is happening. Okay. But I don't like the way they've done it here. Like I don't,
Yeah.
this character's just dull and in paper thin. To the point where when it first cut to him in this viewing, I was like, oh, I think this is the villain. But that was only because I remember, it was like triggering a memory of like, oh, I forgot who the villain was in this movie. It's just this dude who barely has any story other than he wants to do all this because he's, well, an incel or something.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's all we've got. There's never any more. Like somehow Ivor Shandor, who built the tower in the original Ghostbusters, despite the fact that he's never on screen and is only mentioned in one sequence, had more of an impact in my memory because it was at least intriguing what this backstory was versus this guy that we cut to every so often in this movie.
Yeah. And even then, when you first see him, you're not like sure that he's even a character you should be paying attention to, because I'll give him this. He's the only character in this movie who actually feels like he's playing it straight, who feels like the straight man amongst every other actor in this. That includes people who only have like 2 lines. Like you were talking before about the concert scene. They have a guy who's basically the guy who runs the hotel from the first movie, who walks them through and says like, oh yes, there's a ghost around here. I'd like your help catching it. But even then, he's doing a bit the whole time. He's doing this bit where he's like, oh yes, I'm told I have a very unusual scream. And then later on, we see him scream and it's like a children's girl scream. And it's like, why does this character need a bit? I don't understand why every single character here needs to be like this famous improv guy.
It makes the Ghostbusters feel less special because if they're interacting with people that feel a bit more grounded, then it makes them feel more spectacular. So if you have every character around them be quirky and feel, there's a mayor in this. They do the mayor again. It's played by Andy Garcia. And, well, actually, I will say one of the few jokes in this movie that I kind of liked, and I'm going to complain about this mostly because I hate how much this movie is just referencing other like things.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
There's a lot of pop culture references. There's a scene where characters just list Patrick Swayze movies for like 30 seconds and it accomplishes nothing. But the mayor does have one good line, and it's a reference to a movie, but it did make me laugh, so it is possible to have a good reference. But but that was it. That was like the one funny joke for me in the whole movie was that. I won't spoil it yet. We'll get into spoilers.
But no, I think that gets to the heart of it, though, is that this movie has funny situations. There's like, it gives itself a lot of good setups, but just the way that they decide to play them off, it feels so unsatisfactory. It feels like it's just drawn out for the sake of being drawn out. Yeah.
Which was probably only worse than the extended version that I hammed. I didn't know there was an extended version. God damn it.
I specifically, for some reason, YouTube hasn't been letting me rent movies recently. Like, I go to click rent and it just refuses to process my payment. So I need to actually go through Google Play Store in order to get anything. And it was only on the Google Play Store. It was like, oh, well, there's the normal cut and there's the extended cut. I was like, well, nobody's going to be stupid enough to click on the extended cut.
It was not made obvious to me. I made that clear. Anyway.
Fair enough.
So, is there anything else I want to add here? I guess, this is a broad, just modern day movie thing. But it did stick out to me how a lot of the third act is them just standing in front of a green screen with lots of CG behind them.
Yeah.
Which was, unpleasant. So I'll mention that briefly. It's not. I don't like it. It's not good.
Really, I was super into it the whole time, Pete.
I think it's so funny. Like comparing this to Afterlife, and I'll be able to do this better next week when we've watched Afterlife again. But it feels like this movie follows the structure of the original movie. It references so many things from it. And because it's a remake, it actually has, like, it's not a prequel, but it has some of the prequelitis problems that bug me, which is, oh, we're going to do more of an explanation of how they get their equipment and their proton packs, and we're going to show wacky scenes of the first time they turn something on, and it does a lot of that stuff, which I remember finding that tedious the first time. Like, I think I was slightly more positive the first time I saw it, but I will say this, watching this a couple of weeks after watching the original has not done this movie favors.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. I actually was trying to imagine what this movie would be like to somebody who didn't have any exposures to just 1984 Ghostbusters. But honestly, with how many of those, like I said, took 10 minutes in, those wink, wink, nudge, nudge of like, hey, remember this thing? I feel like this movie would be incomprehensible if you hadn't seen the original Ghostbusters, because it relies so heavily on that.
You wouldn't understand. There's so many weird things you wouldn't understand why they're doing them if you had no context of the original Ghostbusters, which is this weird thing where they want to bank on the popularity of it whilst not work. And again, Afterlife goes too far in the other direction of like, we're just going to make this loving nostalgic sequel to the original, but this is a problem in the other direction, whilst also having a lot of there's a lot of crossover between them, despite the fact that they've got very different approaches. There's a lot of crossover in the middle of being too referential, even though they're doing it in very different ways. I
mean, it almost feels to the extent of like parody, where it's just saying, hey, remember this? We're making fun of it now.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the way, whereas Afterlife, the way you're describing it, because again, I haven't seen it, it just sounds more like the way that like Star Wars handled the original trilogy, where it's just like, it's the best thing we've ever done.
Yeah, I will say, I was talking to Tim about the movies because I was just mentioning we're doing them, and he made a really good point about Afterlife, is that it's like it forgot Ghostbusters was meant to be a comedy, and Afterlife's not a terrible movie, but when he said that, it did occur to me, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of more like, oh, it's an adventure, and you know, set in the Ghostbusters world that treats everything that was in Ghostbusters seriously, like that was the point. But Ghostbusters was a comedy about a cynical asshole going along with his two buddies to like make money. It was very much a thing that now it's like, no, we have to treat the Ecto One and the proton packs with this reverence because it was special, and they were icons because they saved the city and all the rest of it. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me about this is that they've redesigned all these things, and it feels like they're different just for the sake of being different, so they all look just a little bit worse. You know, the car, the proton pack, so it's like, it feels like when you get the third party like PlayStation controller, like you've got your, when you were a kid, you got the PlayStation, you had your proper controller for it, but your parents were cheap and then wanted to buy the official second controller, so they get you the Mad Catz one. He's like, it just feels a little cheaper and a little shittier. And that's what a lot of the stuff in this movie feels like.
I don't want to say that I first off, I agree. I do feel like it feels cheaper, but I don't think that is a like baked into the movie thing. I think that's our perceptions of like seeing the first one, getting more associated with it, and then coming to this one. I think it's whatever you're exposed to first is probably the one that you're going to have more of a heartfelt to.
Truth to that. But I think one of the weird things here is like they make a point of interest in the car, obviously, right? But it almost feels like they're giving it this kind of sense of reverence without ever actually. I don't know. There's like a weird disconnect where they're still banking on you caring about the car from the original movie. Yeah. But this has actually done nothing to kind of earn it in this. I don't know. There's something there to that for me.
Not the car. The one that got me in that same exact way, though, is the logo. Because logo,
it's got an origin. There's an origin story to the logo in this one.
It's like, why though? Like, I'm fine with you saying like, oh no, we got a logo designed, whatever. But like, they specifically go out of their way to say like, oh, this wasn't even designed for us. This just happened to happen. This just was a thing that occurred out in the world, and we stumbled across it.
And there's even a scene
so special
right before it that like they have like a joke where Chris Hemsworth is trying to like design a logo for them and shows them a bunch of things, and some of them are just logos that exist, like a 7-Eleven logo, and that's the joke, which isn't very funny. Again, he's too dumb. Like, he's so monumentally dumb that it's beyond being able to be a joke. Yeah. But no, we have to have an origin for the logo. And I think one of the things that bugged me about the outfits, actually, because, you know, whatever, like, they add these stripes. I don't like them necessarily, but they're not necessarily objectively bad. I think the thing that I will objectively point to, though, and say that it makes them look like costumes, like cheap Halloween costumes to me, it's just a simple thing. But because I've thought about dressing up as a Ghostbusters before, and the one thing that to me made it look more authentic and real, for whatever reason, maybe because it breaks it up, the knee pads and the elbow pads, them not having those makes it look just so baggy, and it just feels like they've thrown on an overall and there's nothing to it. For some reason, having those elbow pads and knee pads just make it look like, no, you look like you're a Ghostbuster like SWAT team or something. Like it's like there's.
Well, I think that it needs to come back to looking like exterminators. That was the basis of it, is that they are exterminators. And exterminators in any other situation, they need to crawl into like tiny spaces. They need to be able to set up traps and whatever. So they do have these sort of pads on their suits in order to be like that, you know? But this one, it is just, I'm looking at it now, it is literally just a jumpsuit. Like, it's just a gray flannel jumpsuit that has that stripe on it. So yeah, I think that is slightly weaker there, just objectively.
Yeah, it's just something about breaking up the monotony of the outfit. It just kind of, they feel naked, right? Like, the outfit feels naked without them for whatever reason.
That's fair.
All right, so let's just say spoilers so we can.
The only other thing I wanted to throw out, because I did say I would talk about it in this one.
Oh, the Fallout Boy song.
The Fallout Boy. So, good news. It's barely in the movie. At least the version I watched, they play like one verse, one chorus, and then it's just gone. It's
at the exact same point structurally as the original movie when that played its song properly.
Yep.
Actually, that's not true. That's not true. I'm misremembering that. It doesn't play in the Act 1 in the original movie. It plays during the montage after they've done their first Ghostbusting thing.
Yeah,
so I'm wrong.
That's true.
That was a mismember Barry. Sorry.
But I just want to say, I can listen to the Ghostbusters theme. Like, I think it's catchy. I think it's good. I can just listen to it on its own.
Oh, yeah.
I have listened to the Fallout Boy version of it. I never want to hear that again. It's like they took something that was already, quite literally, a commercial song, and they somehow made it more commercial. They somehow made it more
Sony,
just
baby.
sold out. It's actually incredible that they could kill this song so effectively.
Also, I will say that whenever you hear like the original song in the movie, it's not the original recording. That's still kind of redone, so it's got like a different kind of sound to it. And I think actually it's one of the things at the start of the movie that really, like, I know the original movie did also play a few bars of the theme at the start. You know, when the title comes up, you get a little
right
bit
as soon as the scare happened.
Yeah, dun dun dun. Yeah, and this movie recreates the sort of build up where you sort of do 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 dun 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 dun. Right, that's fine. I get why it's doing it. What I thought was weird about the start of this movie, though, is that they used like a version of the song that still had the lyrics in it. So it felt really weird when it faded out just as the verse was starting, because it's like you hear like one line of like the song and then it's gone, and it's like, why wouldn't you use like an instrumental version? Because I get like, it's okay to fade away from the music quickly, but don't hear the start. It feels like someone had the CD on and just turned it down. It's weird.
No, I saw that exact same thing, and it really threw me off, because they fade into the next scene. It's like in a university, and you hear, if it's something, I'm like, I'm sorry, are we going with the song?
I guess we're not. It's just such a crappy little choice that I just can't fathom why it was made.
I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with like licensing or something like that, but you'd think they would have all that sorted out.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the version at the start of the original was instrumental. They've got that there. Use it. It's sitting in the library. Just go and whack it on.
All right, I'm ready for the review.
Spoilers, everyone. We're going to do spoilers for Ghostbusters 2016, or Ghostbusters Answer the Call, if you prefer that title.
Or Ghostbusters the Extended Edition if you're Pete.
Ghostbusters Live, Die, Repeat. Anyway, so the opening of the movie, I remember thinking this the first time I saw it. 'Cause it's fine. You've got this guy giving like a tour of like a haunted house in New York. Fine, whatever. The actor, though, is a guy who was on the last few seasons of The Office, and the last thing you want to do is remind me of one of the worst characters from the last few seasons of The Office.
I mean, to be fair, I recognized him. I knew he was from The Office, but I never watched The Office, so he was kind of just blank for me.
Gabe. This is Gabe.
I think he was in Silicon Valley, if I remember correctly.
Sounds reasonable enough.
Yeah.
But you know, he's given a little tour. He's got a little prop lamp that falls over a candlestick, so make people think, ooh, spooky, there's a ghost. But then obviously as he's leaving for the night, there's a ghost. Now actually it's the very first scene, but this was where I was hearing lines that I'm like, okay, if Bill Murray kind of shot out some of these lines, I could see them maybe working. But there's all these little jokes as he's like going through giving the tour, where he's like, oh, this clock was on the Titanic and it was rescued. They had to throw over like 4 refugees or something to like fit it on the boat. And it's just these little like supposedly dry little lines as he's like, going around saying these funny backstories to some of these items. Like the guy who built this house was a horrible, horrible man who did all these horrible things, but it was never funny.
I don't remember most of what you're saying there about the Titanic, so that might have been an extended thing.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
for the story that I did get, it was just him basically saying like, yeah, there was this rich dude, he had this mansion, and then like his daughter ended up killing all of his staff in the middle of the night, so he locked his daughter down in the basement and sealed the door shut.
Yeah, he does get to that, obviously, but yeah, there's a couple of jokes. One's about the clock, and what was the other one about? I can't remember, but there was another one that was equally kind of eye-rolly, but you could sort of imagine if like Venkman just shot out like a dark line about this guy's past, it might have worked, but it's just delivered so just so Gabe, I guess. I don't have another word for it.
I mean, it seems, I haven't seen the scene, but it sounds to me like it's probably he delivered 7 or 8 of those lines, and they picked the best 2, and that's how it feels.
Yep. And that's the best 2. That's alarming.
That's the best 2 that didn't make the theatrical cut.
That's true. So... This is even worse. So yeah, obviously he sees a ghost in the basement. He screams, and we go to our movie proper. We're introduced to Kristen Wiig's character, who's trying to make tenure, and immediately you get the dialogue style of this movie, and the entire joke of this opening scene is she's meeting this other fancy professor who's published things and is the scientist, whatever. And basically Kristen Wiig will say something, but every single time she says an opinion on something, this woman then immediately disagrees and gives set of like the surprising thing that she thinks instead. You know, she's like, oh, journals are so important. No, actually, I think journals are very bad for this reason and that reason. And then Kristen Wiig has to pivot what her opinion was really awkwardly. That's the humor here. It's her just sort of like, oh, you know, what I meant to say was this. Yes, of course awards are great. Yes, you're quite right. Like it's just that over and over again. What are you doing? What are you eating?
This is all extended stuff. I have no idea what you're talking about, man.
Well, I'm glad it was cut because it was shit. There's a moment...
The movie on my end started with the guy approaching her with the book in the auditorium.
Okay,
area.
really? All right, so there's some stuff before that. So I think there's another character who might still be in the theatrical cut a little bit. I don't know. Is there like a sort of colleague that comes to talk to her once or twice?
There's Charles Dance. He's the only one who talks to her.
Okay, I guess this guy isn't. There's a guy who I think's meant to be kind of her boyfriend, but that's only really implied in this one scene because she goes to kiss him goodbye at the end of the scene and he just doesn't like turn for the kiss, so she just kind of awkwardly kisses him on the shoulder, but then every time he pops up after that it just kind of feels like he's a colleague, so I don't know. I think it was maybe like an awkward relationship she was in. I don't
know. Sounds weird.
Yeah.
Glad it was gone.
And there's a lot of talk of her being excited that she's lecturing in the big room. Cut to her in the big room and she's like stretching on the podium and doing all sorts of like there's all these weird little physical things that I've like. I don't really think of Kristen Wiig as being a physical like comedian, but
like slapstick.
Yeah, but this movie has a lot of her being like dragged away like by 2 henchmen and things like that, and you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I can see it. I think she does an okay job with it in this, but it does like most all of the physical comedy in this comes down to there's a CGI thing that's just like around you, so it's more so of how they react to CGI than. Yeah, how much they actually have like a physical prop fall or something like that.
I think Kristen Wiig was like the thing I was looking forward to the most when I saw this originally, because I think she is talented, and I think they almost made a mistake, and maybe it's because they were trying to make her not too much like Venkman, but I do feel like she excels better when she's being kind of mean. So her being this like underdog who is feeling like, you know, picked on by everyone else around her and being hard done by. It felt like a mismatch, because I think if I remember what I liked about Bridesmaids, it was when she was just being like, just dropping C-bombs on strangers who spoke to her slightly rudely and just being like abrasive. And this character is the total opposite of that, where she's the one who's been beat down on. She's the one who is struggling, And it just kind of felt like this is not what her strength is. And not to say that she can always only play one type of character, but I just don't think this worked here.
Yeah, I mean, actors have especially in comedy, they have a specific style that kind of works for them, and it's not a huge deal to kind of fall into that and use that. For instance, Melissa McCarthy.
She's definitely Melissa McCarthy in this. I can't deny that.
Yep.
Oh, dear. Anyway, yeah, so I mean, I don't necessarily have to go over plot detail, but her and Melissa McCarthy wrote a book years ago, which Kristen Wiig thought she'd eradicated from existence. But Melissa McCarthy's been selling it on Amazon, which is why Ed Begley Jr. shows up with the book to say, hey, can you come and investigate this mansion, the event of the opening scene, because something happened that was spooky. So Kristen Wiig goes to see McCarthy at this little shitty college, because Kristen Wiig's in like Columbia. She's at a prestigious place. She's trying to get tenure. Charles Dance is saying, hey, don't mess up. Get a good reference. Princeton's not good enough. Get a reference from Harvard or Oxford, please.
Yeah.
So she goes to just try and get the book taken down. She goes to confront Melissa McCarthy, and she's already working with Kate McKinnon, and they're kind of kooky. They've got this lab full of junk food. And here starts, and I remember this joke being in the theatrical cut, so I know you saw this. The running gag of how many wontons are in her soup. I'm
so happy this joke kept showing up. I was thrilled because, you know, the first time it lasted maybe like a minute and a half. And I said, golly gee,
so long.
If only that kept going.
It's so long.
God, no, it's just like there's a food delivery guy shows up from like a Chinese place she likes, and they end up having their Ghostbusters headquarters over top of this Chinese place. So
yeah.
That's a whole thing, but the running joke is that she keeps on getting like a tub that's supposed to be wonton soup that only has a single wonton in it, or like a single shrimp if she orders something else, and she's just constantly berating the delivery guy for allowing that to be delivered to her. It's a joke by some definition, but it's more of filler than anything else.
This also leads to another problem with the comedy here, and this maybe comes from the fact that they're doing so much improv, or it feels like they're doing a lot of improv, is that so much of the comedy and the jokes don't really have anything to do with anything that's actually like the plot of the movie. You know, like you go back to Ghostbusters, so much of the jokes are tied to like what they're investigating. It's Bill Murray cracking a line about the ghost in the library, or the talking to Dana, or it's jokes about like. Yeah, obviously, you've got characters like Rick Moranis' character who's, you know, talking about tax stuff, but that's because he's been set up for something later. But most of the jokes that come from the regular characters, the main Ghostbusters, are all tied to what they're doing as part of the plot. They may not serve advancing the plot, but they all comment on the plot itself. So many of the jokes in this are just wonton soup. Patrick Swayze movies. Oh, we're going to reference Oprah saying, you get a car, and you get a car, because I'm pretty sure that was dated when this movie came out, and this movie's 8 years old now.
6 days after she did that. I think it's a thing in the Ghostbusters original where every joke kind of had the structure of exposition or something that is like happening to the characters. It's something that is forwarding the plot, and then punchline or a quip or something like that. It's something that's responding to the thing that's happening. So you're still getting forward momentum in the plot as these little quips are being made. It's just them responding to the quips or to the exposition. This one, it's a thing happens. Maybe it has to do with the plot, maybe it doesn't. Food delivery does not. Sometimes it does, like the getting a car thing. But then it's the person makes a quip, and then someone riffs off of them, and then they riff back, and before you know it, we've spent a full minute on what should have been 10 seconds.
Yeah, how short would this movie be if you just cut out all the riffing?
There wouldn't be a movie.
I would suspect you get through the whole plot. If you just keep the essential things, you'd probably get down to about 35 minutes. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's my guess. Yeah, I think one of the things that just sort of occurred to me as you were saying that is that Venkman in the original movie clearly can't believe that he's in the world that he's in, right? He can't believe he's a part of this. He can't believe that this is all happening. But he gets that across via writing and via the performance, never by saying, I can't believe I'm in this world, which is what the modern self-referential version of this is. They just have the character say, whoa, I can't believe how crazy this all is that it's happening. Instead of the person just clearly feeling that way, but by how they're reacting to the thing, by how they're frustrated that they're dealing with ghosts now, right? He's like, oh shit, we have to do this now. Like, kind of, like, I just... There's a very distinct difference where it feels like it's been boiled down to just characters saying, I feel this way, as opposed to showing as they feel that. I guess it's showing, it's telling rather than showing, which is the number one rule typically of storytelling. But anyway.
Yeah.
So
the guy who said, hey, the mansion's haunted, Kristen Wiig mentions that to Melissa McCarthy, and immediately her and Kate McKinnon are just like, oh, sweet, awesome, let's go. We're going to go check it out. Yeah. And Kristen Wiig ends up tagging along. Yes,
they talk to them outside. We already kind of mentioned the main joke there. They go in to the house, they're investigating, and I guess technically this would be the equivalent to the Ghostbusters in the original checking out the library. So it definitely feels like it's taken like an extra 10 minutes. In fact, on that point, at least admittedly, it'll be a little bit sooner than the theatrical cut, I'm sure.
Yes.
But in the extended cut, it was almost at the hour mark when they were driving to the rock concert, which is the equivalent of the hotel in the first movie. In the first movie, I'm pretty sure that happens at about 30 minutes. So, admittedly, yeah, it's probably a 5 minutes earlier in the theatrical cut, but almost double the runtime to get to the sort of same structural point of the plot is very interesting from a comparison point of view.
Sorry, I've got it open here. I'm just checking. It happens 50 minutes in.
Yeah, so...
That's when they drive over.
Yeah, just an interesting point of comparison. But anyway, that's not important. What's important here is promoting Pringles, because the ghost appears, right? And Kate McKinnon just starts crunching on a Pringle, and you can see the can in under her arm, and Kristen Wiig's like, how could you be eating right now? Cuts back to Kate McKinnon, and she says, once you pop... That's just their slogan. Wait, You're just saying their slogan.
Wait, did she actually say once you pop?
Yes.
Okay, that was not in my edition. In my edition,
that was an extended thing.
In my, she's like, oh, could you be eating at a time like this? And she says, like, you try denying these tasty parabolas or something like that.
So there's different lines in the extended cut? Oh,
apparently.
Wow. Okay,
I thought that my line was bad, but if she's just literally saying the slogan, no, that's not okay.
She says, once you pop, and I'm like, this isn't even just product placement. This is an ad. You just said their line.
Oof.
That's like having it's like if in Mac and Me, right, which we did on Extra Reels over at patreon.com/MailPlusTV, check it out. But it's like if in Mac and Me at the McDonald's scene, as bad as it is, and admittedly, this didn't exist in the 80s, this slogan, but someone just went, man, I'm loving it, and just bit into the burger. Like, that's the equivalent.
Yeah, it is. Oh, God. Yeah, okay, so I just want to say this right here, if we're going to do this. The ad campaign that went around Ghostbusters 2016, I think that pissed me off more than anything the movie actually did, because it was just all of Sony's everything, and then I like pizza, all right? That's not a controversial statement. The campaign they had going with Papa John's pissed me off every single time that it came about, for no discernible reason other than it feels so like, why in the hell is this pizza place funding this movie so hard? Anyway.
Oh, dear. Right. They get covered in, well, Kristen Wiig gets covered in slime at least.
Yeah. She gets covered in slime and then the ghost escapes. Just leaves the building and they have nothing to do. But the entire time they were recording their antics, and so Kristen Wiig's just like, oh my god, I saw a ghost, I believe in ghosts, which then makes its way back onto YouTube to Charles Dance, and he's like, well, you're not getting tenure, bye now.
And Charles says, yes, someone found this on Reddit, and I'm like, which of your colleagues at Columbia University is browsing Reddit exactly? You think of yourself so highly, but you're still browsing Reddit when you're meant to be working. That was all I'm saying. And he's like, yeah, one of my colleagues. Yeah, I bet it was you. You're on the subreddits. You're looking at, I don't know. Am I the asshole?
Yeah. Every single time he replies, yes.
I fired one of my professors for believing in ghosts. Am I the asshole?
No, you're not the asshole unless she like really, really had some good proof there.
And this was probably only the extended cut, but this is another example of like the commentary thing that I was talking about. Is that after she has the conversation with him where he fires her, there's a scene where she's walking down the hall with her box of like her plan and all, you know, the classic I've been fired, so I've got my box of stuff from my desk. And as she's walking, like she's so like everyone keeps staring at her, so she's so concerned that everyone's like, oh, she's been fired. And she's like, oh, I'm just walking to my new office. You know, so I got my plan here, it's okay. And she just keeps talking to, and it lasts like 90 seconds to 2 minutes of just her talking and trying to lie about why she's when there's several reasons why someone could be like walking with a box. Like no one cares, no one gives a shit.
Yeah, that is in the theatrical, but I don't. It doesn't go nearly as long as 90 seconds. It's maybe you got like more lines.
The reason why I assumed it wasn't is because she bumps into the colleague that I mentioned earlier, and she tries to talk to him.
Yeah, that part doesn't happen.
And he just ignores her and doesn't talk to her. I think, or what did he say something? I can't remember. But the point is that I figured at least that part, was cut out.
Yeah, that's gone. So after that, she makes her way back over to Melissa McCarthy's college, and they're basically like, yeah, no, don't worry about them. You can set up with us. We're going to set up all this new equipment and stuff. I just got to go upstairs and ask for more funding.
Actually, before we get to that, because obviously we're going to talk about that, I will just say that like it feels like there should be more conflict with like, or more hesitation. And like I feel like Kristen Wiig's character at this point should feel like, okay, well, I have to be with them now because I have no other option because I got fired. Yeah. But instead, she's just kind of cool with it within like 30 seconds. Like, she's just on board.
Okay, so here's the biggest problem I have with Kristen Wiig's plot, and it's her friendship with Melissa McCarthy, in that it starts off as they were old friends, they grew apart, and one of them is trying to be a professional, the other one is following her passion. That's fine. That's a good enough plot. But the way that it wraps up, and we'll get to it eventually, but the way that it wraps up, it feels like this entire movie, they should have still been like more at odds than what they were. Like occasionally they have like a quick little like argument about something, but ultimately they're always still extremely close friends.
Yeah, they should be clashing the whole movie. They should have like different ideologies about how to tackle things so that at the end, when it's like, no, I'm going to jump in and save you and risk my life, and you know, I'm sorry we ever split up. Like that should that's the payoff to them being that bit. As soon as she's like joined up, we're besties. That's just it. We're just besties for the rest of the movie. There's like
every once in a while, Kristen Wiig has like a little bit of, but I have to like prove it's real. I have to be like more on the side of academia than just paranormal.
The story is just absent. The only thing they really do is have a slight running gag that Melissa McCarthy, because she keeps like posting things online or whatever, like Kristen Wiig obviously doesn't like that she keeps looking like a fool in the press or looking like a fool publicly, but it's so slight and it doesn't feel like it's really hammering home the conflict between them, that they broke down their friendship and that it's going to be reconciled by the end. So the ending has no meaning for their pair of characters in that sense, because they never did the work to make it matter. So anyway, like I said, it's like, hey, we can get funding here. This is a fun, wacky college. They'll fund our ghost shit. They've been letting us do this work for years now. And then they go to the dean, I guess, at this place, and he's like, wait, I didn't realize we were still funding your shit. That's done. That's over. But of course, and that's okay. What I just said is fine. That's an okay joke, I guess. That, you know, they didn't realize they were still funding this. Now that we've realized you're still here, you're gone. That's a perfectly fine joke. That's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about this character who... Why it goes back to what you said about the guy at the rock show. Why is everyone such a cartoon? Because this guy just like again, I don't know which. I know I'm like paranoid about which snippets were not in the theatrical cut. But I mean,
this scene goes on pretty much too long on my side as well. So,
but you know, he's like, I've got 2 words for you, and Kirsten Wiig's like, get out, and McCarthy's like, no, he's going to say suck it. It's like, he's not going to say suck it. Suck it. He did say suck it. And again, like that little comment at the end, he did say suck it. You didn't need that. Like the payoff to this very admittedly not good joke was him saying it. You didn't have to then comment on the fact that he said it, right?
And then we get the extended parade of middle finger jokes that this guy can pull out. He's just like, oh, is that a ghost? Oh no, it's a bird. Look at the birds. And it keeps going. And all I could think during this entire sequence is, what if Melissa McCarthy said, oh yeah, we just got to get upstairs to get more funding. They love us. Smash cut to, they're leaving with all of their stuff.
That would be funnier. That would absolutely be funnier. Like,
absolutely.
They're walking out the building and there's just one line saying, oh, they didn't realize they were still funding us. That's it. That's all you need. Smash cut to that as they're leaving.
Yep. You can even still have the little joke they have where they're like, oh yeah, no, we stole all this stuff. Like, it belongs to the university, but we're just taking it. I'm fine with that too. But like, because they have drawn this out during the getting funding scene for so long, I just wanted it to be over by that point. I was just like, okay, good. Show me you being Ghostbusters. Stop with this like intermediate stuff. Do you remember the scene where Ray had to go and take out like a third mortgage on his house? Yeah. That was it. That was the scene. You had one scene where they talked about what are we going to do, one scene where they went to the bank, and then from then on, that's it. They are now in business.
Yeah. And we even go to the original fire station location.
Yeah.
Because they're like, hey, this is perfect. We'll run a little business out of here. Admittedly, okay, I said earlier there was one joke that I liked. As much as like teasing the audience with this location only to take it away, I will admit when the realtor says the rent is like $20,000, the one PG-13 F-bomb that Kristen Wiig drops when she just says F off is legitimately kind of funny. And I think it's because it's almost dipping into her being a meaner character by her just like, I mean, it almost seems demeaning to say she's at her funniest when she's just yelling swear words at people randomly, but she is good at it. I
mean, I will say this is not the PG-13 F-bomb in my version. She just says burn in hell, but it gets the same point across.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so really she's like $27,000 a month. She's like, F off! Like that's immediately what she says.
I mean, it's played with the same tone here. It's like, oh yeah, $21,000 a month, burn in hell. And she's, oh, I'm sorry, that was just a reaction of mine. I didn't even know what I was saying there.
I assumed that was still in because they can have one F-bomb in a PG-13.
Yeah,
but I guess
feel like they still did. Maybe they just reallotted it elsewhere. I'm not sure.
That's weird. Okay. So cut to, no, we're going to go to this little place above the Chinese restaurant, and that's where we're going to set up shop. Yep. And I'm going to call this the dance floor because they dance in this place multiple times for no reason. Yep. I'm pretty sure I got at least one extra dance scene that you didn't because I don't remember it from the original. And it was probably the most egregious because they kind of dressed up for it as well, which was weird.
That sounds lame. So we did skip over one brief little scene here, and that is the introduction of Patty, who is played by, I'm blanking on her name at the moment, Leslie Jones.
Leslie Jones. I think we were going to talk about the villain. Like, I was like, we're not going to fit those villain scenes in where they go because I'm never going to remember that. But yeah,
that's what the villain is here. Yeah. So the
okay, technically, but I mean, like, he's got individual scenes that are just kind of sprinkled after this.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to remember that. But Leslie, she works on the subway. She's just trying to greet people as they walk in, and everyone's ignoring her except for this weird little pale guy who comes up and just being like, "Oh yeah, people, they're going to keep on ignoring you. People just suck. This world needs to be cleansed, yeah?" And Patty's like,
"Yeah,
all right."
He basically says, "Don't worry, when the apocalypse comes, people like you will be the last to die. So enjoy that time."
And immediately Leslie's like, "Okay, well, bye now." And she sees him go down onto the tracks and then witnesses a ghost down there. And we also see this little machine thing that was also present in the mansion as well.
Yeah, the villain's like triggering these ghost attacks with these little gizmos. That's all you need to know about that.
Yeah.
It's all part of his master plan. We'll get to that in the third act where it actually means a damn thing.
Yep.
So, yeah, she goes to see the Ghostbusters, and I think around this time as well is when we get introduced to Hemsworth's character, who's the receptionist. He comes in looking for the job, and the running joke is that he is very dumb. He doesn't answer the phone. He straight up doesn't understand that a window's not a door at one point. Like, he is so absurdly dumb that it's...
when they're talking about him, saying whether or not they should hire him, he walks over to a fish tank, which has like a phone inside of it for some reason as like a decoration, and it just keeps on trying to like reach out for it, and he keeps hitting the glass over and over again. And I'm like, okay, so he's just like dumber than most animals. That's
like,
what we're going with here.
Like, it's okay to have a dumb character and that to like sort of get lead way to a lot of jokes about them misunderstanding things, but like have him like one of the and it's not funny on its own, but like there's a joke where he tries to sort of say what they say about what the business is, and he sort of tries to say, oh, you've got a factor 4 spectral blah blah blah, and he sort of mumbles like he doesn't know what the words were, and I'm like, okay, that at least makes sense. I understand someone's dumb enough that they didn't retain that knowledge, but he's so dumb that it's actually just beyond the point of even being able to like give them the what's the word I'm looking for, not artistic license, but the suspension of disbelief, I guess.
Yes.
Right, that this is a person that could exist and be remotely functioning to the point where he's a hunky man who clearly works out and all the other things. So,
but again, the only reason that they even end up hiring him is because Kristen Wiig just immediately latches onto him. It's just like, oh, you're hot as hell, so yeah, we're gonna keep you around.
Which never really goes anywhere.
No.
It's just a couple of little jokes here or there, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, I will say, I think that this intro, like interview scene with him, is probably the better jokes that he has, but it also feels like this is the ones that Hemsworth like sat down and was able to prepare his own stuff that the other people got to banter off of, rather than him bantering off of them. So like there's one point where he's like, oh yeah, can I bring my cat to the place? And they're like, oh no, we're allergic to cats. He's like, oh, it's not a cat. And it's like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, Mike Hat. That's what I named my dog.
Oh no, I hated this. No, okay, I hated this joke.
That's fair. I'm not saying it's a great joke, but it did feel like the only time where Hemsworth was taking the lead. He was taking the initiative in the setup rather than having to banter off of them.
And there's always a chance though that his stuff is just from the script. Like he's not even.
That's possible.
That. Yeah. It gives him like a ghost logo with it's got big boobs. Is it the boobs? I can make them bigger. And I'm like, that was almost a joke.
But then there's no punchline. They just riff until they run out of steam, and they say, "Well, let's move on to the next thing."
I agree. I want a punchline, and I want to move forward. That's what I want in comedy.
Yeah. So yeah, they end up agreeing to hire him, and then Leslie Jones is already there in the waiting room saying, "Hey, I saw a ghost. Can you help me out?"
Yeah, so they go and investigate, and we've got like early versions of some of the equipment. So it's like it needs a trolley, and it's not, it's not quite the proton pack shit or anything like that.
Yep.
But yeah, they go down. They see the ghost.
Well, they go down and they see like a guy there, and they're like, "Hey, did you see the ghost?"
So the graffiti thing's first, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, the camera never looks at what he's doing with the graffiti, but when they start talking about ghosts, he's clearly drawing a ghost. And then because Leslie Jones keeps saying, you can't do that, you can't spray paint here, this is not your personal art gallery, he goes, oh, fine, okay, we're not allowed ghosts. And then he picks up the red can and obviously makes the censor sign. And when he walks away, and it's not even just that he's made the Ghostbusters logo and this is the origin of it. The fact that like they have Kate McKinnon sort of as she's going past it look at it and go, hey, that's a good logo. I'm like, oh my god. Yeah. Like, oh, you don't have a last name?
It's always that one line too far where you're like, guys, it would have been so much better if you stopped when you were ahead.
You don't have a last name? I'll call you Solo. Han Solo. That like
yeah, pretty much.
I hate it. I hate it so much. It does not need an explanation. We don't need a scene where they're testing the proton pack for the first time and Melissa McCarthy is flying around because it's like it's jet streaming her up into the air like a rocket. Like, I remembered hating that scene the first time I saw it as well. And that's not quite next, but it's soon. It's like soon after this.
It's pretty much.
You know, 'cause it's like, hey, we need to try and trap a ghost. We need better equipment. So, you know, we get like Kate McKinnon like practicing like the stuff with them out in the alleyway, which we do twice for some reason. Like, there's like a second round of equipment that they add later, where it's like, hey, we've got ghost grenades now, and we've got little handgun proton packs and things like that. Which I don't mind them expanding the arsenal necessarily. Although I will say, when we get to the third act, it felt like they were just blasting ghosts until they disappeared, instead of like, wait, do you not have to trap them anymore?
Right. Okay. So here's that's like a major thing for me. And if we want to talk about it, then so be it. But they set up all this other arsenal stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, you like can throw a grenade and it'll explode and the ghosts will go poof or whatever. I'm fine with you changing the lore. I'm fine with you saying, oh, every time a ghost passes through a wall or something, it leaves just this massive amount of slime. That's fine. That's the way you want to handle your universe, so be it. But they explicitly set up in the beginning and saying, we, at this rock show, we can catch ghosts via the same method that the original Ghostbusters used. You take the proton packs, you lure them towards the trap, and then you set the trap. That's all you got to do. That's the whole bit. So when we get into the third act fight and they have all this entire expanded arsenal, none of them are trapped. They have not launched a single trap since the rock show. And all of these ghosts are essentially punched into submission, which that part kind of didn't sit with me. These are ghosts. These are ethereal beings. And you're telling me that you can just punch them into submission? Am I crazy right here?
Yeah. I didn't jump in there. I felt like you wanted a dramatic pause at the end of that sentence, so I'll let it sit.
I liked so much more of the movie once the third act started, because it meant they had to stop riffing and just get the plot going.
Which is like kind of like this. I mean, I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, because it's been an afterthought until that point, it's like none of it means anything. It just feels so lackluster as a result. So yeah. Anyway, like the rock show thing like kicks up, and they get the call, and by this point they've got the car. You know, Leslie Jones got the car from her uncle who runs a funeral place, and
real quick before we go. Yeah. Like, this is happening simultaneously here. They are watching a TV that's basically reporting on their ghost video from down in the subway, because that's gone viral as well.
Okay, all right. So we're getting to the first cameo. Okay,
yes. And, well, I don't even care that much about the cameo yet. I mean, obviously we'll talk about it. But the thing that gets me is that they have this sequence where the cameo shows up and basically says, nah, they're frauds. They're all fakes and liars. And we get this kind of like dour moment where they say like, oh, by the way, there's the thing in Kristen Wiig's backstory where she saw a ghost growing up and all of her like friends at school made fun of her for it.
Oh, some of that's
Melissa McCarthy.
Some of that's actually in the theatrical cut. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought all of that was cut, but fair enough.
Yeah. No, they specifically the part where they say they call her the ghost girl, and they made fun of her for it. So as they're saying, nah, these Ghostbusters are all frauds and liars and whatnot, they specifically say, oh, well, I guess we're all the ghost girls now. And it's kind of a dour moment where like, oh, they're not being believed or whatnot. And then fast forward 45 minutes, they have another sequence where they're not believed, and they say the exact same thing. Like they have they see on TV where they're not being believed, and they say, oh, so we're all the ghost girls now. I'm like, you did this. I watched this. This happened.
Also, this news report is where they get named, because they don't pick the name in this. The press names them the Ghostbusters, and Kristen Wiig doesn't like that name. She wants whatever fancy scientific name she had.
Conductors of Metaphysical Examination.
Yeah, it's got a nice ring to it.
Yep.
But I think what stuck out to me about that is that there's not really I don't really have a problem with that joke in general. That it's like, that's not the name they wanted. The press called them that, but by the end, they're going to, you know what? Yeah, call us that. We're the goddamn Ghostbusters. But that's fine. But there is something a little funny to me about this, just in a meta sense, because it feels like this movie doesn't really want to be a Ghostbusters movie, but it has to be a Ghostbusters movie. So the idea that the character doesn't want that name and is rejecting it is really funny.
Yeah.
In a meta sense. Like, it's not funny in the movie, but it's funny to me to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's just like, no, that's trademarked. We can't be that. Don't call us that.
Yeah, well, we'll save the cameo for when he shows up in person
Okay.
later. But
So yeah, they get a call from the rock show, and
Yeah.
we saw earlier that our little evil guy walks in, and he's just like, gonna cleanse the world, everyone's gonna die, and he sets up his machine.
As he throws up devil horns to everyone he walks past because it's a rock concert.
Absolutely.
So, they get the call. Remember how in the original, because I even said it's one of the most iconic moments of the original when the We Got One, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's that slow build. And again, there's no suspense in this movie. There's no construction of like building to what the point of the scene is, where you're getting excited because they're, like, not to get crude, but they're edging you up to the climax of the scene where they're like, this is the point. Yeah. And that's what that scene in the original does. Janine answers the phone and she's like not paying attention. She's bored. She's like getting her shoe on and she's like, yeah, it's the Ghostbusters. She doesn't care. But then her tone starts to change, right? She starts to like, wait, what, really? Huh? Yeah, of course they are. And she gets kind of excited. And then she hangs up, she slams the phone down, and the punctuation, and it's not even a punchline in the sense of a joke, but it's the punchline in terms of the full stop at the end of the scene where she's like, we got one, and rings the bell, and it's a call to action. This movie, because we've got this running joke that Chris Hemsworth shit at the phone, the equivalent scene is him picking up the phone and going, yeah, okay, yeah, and then he just hangs up, and then like, hey, Kevin, what was that? What's going on? He's like, people at the rock concert, they saw a ghost or something.
Not even that. He sets down the phone, and then he picks up two of his headshots and says, which one makes me look smarter? And they're both like posing with a saxophone, and it's like, what is this moment? What are we doing?
I think the only explanation for that is that he has a line in his introduction that says he tried at the acting thing, so I can only assume he's still trying to be an actor. And this
no, I get it from like what his character's supposed to be. I meant from like a script perspective of like, I get it. Yeah, he set down the phone and he didn't think it was important. Like, fine, that's a good enough joke, but like, again, it keeps happening. They keep playing the same beats over and over again of like, yeah, he's crap at the phone. And it's like, we got that joke. How many different ways are you going to play it?
It has to evolve, I guess. If that's what a running joke is you evolve. It
changes, but it doesn't feel like it builds.
Yeah, and then you subvert it maybe later on. That's a way to pay off a joke, perhaps. Anyway,
yeah.
So
at this point, they drive to the rock concert. They got the full hearse with all of the gear and the logos and all that. They got the costumes from Leslie Jones because she just brought them from her work, I guess. They are now 100% full Ghostbusters.
Yeah, she says she got them jumpsuits because, I suppose they gave them more of a reason to have them this time because it's like, hey, we might get slimed because all these ghosts leave slime around. But she's like, I got us these jumpsuits, implying she just grabbed them at her work or wherever. Yeah. And yet they have the Ghostbusters logo already on their shoulders. That's
Do they?
I think so. Do they not?
I'm fast forwarding through. I'm not immediately seeing them there yet. So maybe they sew them on after this scene.
Maybe, yeah, okay, fair enough. I just remember noticing them later on, so I assumed they were there in this scene. But that's a fine detail if they caught that. But anyway, they go to the thing. They're bantering around backstage, and there's a whole bit where Kate McKinnon's putting on wigs and hats and mugging to the camera. Again, it just goes back to the jokes aren't around what they're doing necessarily. They're just like random things that are inserted because random is funny. And not really. Set up and payoff is funny.
Random can be funny like once or twice. When it's the whole movie, it stops being random. At that point, it's just white noise.
And of course, this is like a big demonic looking ghost at the rock concert. And they end up straight up just like being on stage, like firing their proton packs at the ghost, which is over the crowd. I remember the trailer because the trailer played all the time, like before it came out. I got like PTSD at the joke where Leslie Jones jumps into to crowd surf and they all just move out the way. And she's like, I don't know if it was a race thing or a lady thing, but I'm mad as hell. I just remember that bit in the trailer, like constantly.
See, I don't even remember it being in the trailer, but even in the movie, it doesn't work because immediately beforehand, Melissa McCarthy crowd surfs. So
it's definitely a race thing, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like, it's clearly not a lady thing. The other lady just did it. It's also sadly kind of, to get real here for a second, this poor actress got harassed
by so many people when this movie came out. Specifically, probably because she was the black actress of the group. And I mean, they all got sexist shit, don't get me wrong, but she was specifically targeted. It was very, very nasty. So it almost like in a real world sense, it was like, oh, this is like a sad bit of foreshadowing for like how. Because
yeah.
I was gonna say, like, obviously, I don't like the movie. I think it's quite bad. But like, none of them deserved any of the shit they got when it came out. Like, no actor deserves shit because they were in a bad movie, right? No one does. It's awful.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. You don't like the movie, you don't watch the movie. You don't then go to the people involved in the movie and make their life worse because of it. You just You are in control of the things you watch. Don't take that out on other people.
But you ruined my childhood.
It would only ruin your childhood if you take this as canon, which you can just as easily say it's not.
I mean, so much so that the next movie just ignores it and goes back to the canon again.
Absolutely. So yeah, no, this scene, it plays out. There's one joke that gets me though, which is the demon ghost is just perched on Leslie's shoulders for like an uncomfortably long amount of time. And I'm not sure how they're trying to play it, because clearly Leslie knows it's there and she's just trying to like shuffle herself away, but everyone else is talking to her as if she doesn't know it's on her. Like they keep on calling out, just being like, Leslie, just a moment there. And she's like, nope, don't want to hear it. Not gonna bother. And was that changed up in the extended cut?
No, not really.
All right. I just didn't, that was the one joke that like, even the way they presented it, I couldn't tell how I was supposed to take it.
Yeah. I assume the theatrical cut also had the Ozzy Osbourne cameo at the end.
Yeah. But like, I don't get it.
It's so random. He
just stands there and he says like, oh, Sharon, I think I'm having a flashback. To what?
Oh, the line's different. Oh, that's not what he says in the extended cut.
All right, what did he say?
In the extended cut, he goes, Black Sabbath did this in 1973, and then walks off.
I don't like either.
Yeah, I don't like either, but that's so weird. Why is there alternate lines?
I don't know, just to give you a reason to download the extended edition, even if you still remember the theatrical.
Oh, God, like, you may as well just like say, hey, this is the alternate cut where it's not extended, but like we've swapped out like almost every joke because they were all like improv 5 different ways, so we picked the second best version of every line.
I would love if this were actually like a Mass Effect ending where my portal was green but your portal was blue. That'd be fantastic.
Oh, God. It's usually blue, but I don't remember what color it was at the end of this.
Yeah. So, yeah, they capture the big demon thing, they trap it, and now they're treated as, like, celebrities because everyone there actually saw the ghost and actually saw them catch him.
Which Michael Kenneth Williams shows up with another guy. They're agents who are tasked with dealing with the ghost problem, and they're wanting to bring the Ghostbusters to the mayor. And
well, sorry, don't want to jump on your shoes here, but I gotta, because it does, like, you can't put it in later. The Bill Murray scene.
Oh, is that next? Okay, I didn't realize that was next.
Yep.
Yeah, so Bill Murray was obviously in the news thing before, and Bill Murray clearly just like, I want to do a kooky character who's got like kind of like an artsy kind of like voice. Like he's like, oh yes, this is preposterous. There are no ghosts. This is all balderdash. That's not what he says, but like that's the sort of like attitude he gives. And he's the skeptic, which I guess you could say is kind of a reference to Venkman. But I remember hearing before the movie came out that all of like most of the original cast have cameos, but not as their characters because it's not set in the same universe. Right. Which is kind of weird. Like it does feel just off in so many ways, and it almost feels that Bill Murray said, "Yeah, I'll do a cameo, but I get to be kooky and I get to die." Because he dies at the end of the scene, seemingly, where the ghost they finally agree to let the ghost out so he can see it, and it just grabs him and throws him out the window. So
and then the ghost goes flying off. I will say, apparently there is a real life version of that book that McCarthy and Wiig apparently wrote when they were kids, and it's quote unquote the updated version, and it has a foreword by this guy who he didn't die. So
okay.
in the extended canon, he lives. In the movie, yeah, he probably dies.
David.
Yes.
Don't describe Ghostbusters 2016 as having an extended canon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, I know. It hurt me to read. I was like, oh no, there's supplementary materials. Oh God.
Oh Jesus. All right.
So yeah, at that point they go outside. They're trying to explain to police, yeah, a ghost killed this guy. Oops.
Yeah.
And that's when the Homeland Security guys show up.
And the running thing with the mayor, and I'll probably just talk about all the mayor scenes here, to be honest, is that him and his assistant are basically saying, hey, it's great that you did this, like you've actually solved this ghost thing here, you did good work. However, you're drawing attention to it and becoming minor celebrities, and we can't have that. We don't want people to know this is going on. So we're going to have to just tell everyone you're frauds, and that's like a recurring thing where even after the rock concert thing, or even later at the hotel,
yeah,
like the assistants like saying, hey, yeah, these women, they read Eat, Pray, Love, and they just ran with that. Another reference, another pop culture reference.
Oh, those crazy women and their hormones making up ghost stories. Har, har, har.
But hon, before the third act properly kicks off and Kristen Wiig's realizing how bad everything's about to get, she actually tries to run to go see the mayor. So we'll get to what I think is the one funny line of the movie, right? Which is, she comes in, she tries to explain to him that they have to evacuate the city. He's like, oh, never say that word, never say evacuate. And she's like, oh, we have to do this, this is going to happen. And he basically just hard says no. And she says, oh my God, you're being worse than the mayor from Jaws. And the line that I think is probably the funniest line in the whole movie is he gets very serious. He says, never compare me to the mayor of Jaws. Never.
Yeah.
That is genuinely a funny reference.
Yeah, because it's a setup and a punchline. It's not a riff, it's a joke.
Look, I have to grasp at the one or two straws they can give me. Her F-bomb earlier on was somewhat funny. This never compare me to the mayor of Jaws, also funny.
And I didn't even get that first one, so I only have one funny line.
And that's it. That's all my positives.
So, weird thing, just going back to how Homeland Security and the mayor are handling this. You explained it that they are basically saying you're proving ghosts are real. And you're not the first to do that. But we come in and we essentially act as the men in black and say humanity cannot live with that kind of knowledge. So we are just going to discredit you and treat you like you're definitely wrong. Thoughts on that? On the fact that the men in black essentially exist and they've come after the Ghostbusters?
Yeah. I don't have much to say. All I remember is Kate McKinnon sort of like giving these little snipey one-liners after everything they said about it. Where like, oh, what city? Oh, how'd they die? Was it this? Was it that?
Yeah, she goes on a bit too far with that one.
I mean, honestly, this part of the movie, I'm probably skipping over a couple things just to get to the third act.
Well, here, I'll give the very brief things here. We got the extra arsenal scene where we introduce all the new weapons, like the grenades and a punching proton blast glove.
And also one that's like a shredder where it sucks them in, but then just farts out slime from the back. And I'm like, you can just shred the ghosts now? Okay, that seems very useful.
So then they go upstairs and they look at all the different ghost sightings that have been reported and they put them onto a map. And that's where we get it's the scene where they're in the jail from the first movie. They put it all together. There are ley lines, which are spiritual energy lines around the world. And this guy, who they still haven't met yet, is charging up these lines so as to open up a portal at where they intersect.
Which is the hotel that he works in as a janitor, I think. And
they see his picture online, and Leslie Jones recognizes him, and is like, okay, to the hotel.
There was a scene before this where we see him at work. I don't know if this was in the theatrical cut, but he goes to an old woman who's complaining about this slime coming down the side of her door.
We didn't get the old woman. We just got the part where he was like told something was going on, and then they cut away from him.
Yeah, the joke here is that she's complaining about the slime. What is this? And he tries to explain, oh, that's just some leaking from the air conditioner or something like that. And she's like, blah, 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 blah. And eventually says, don't worry, we'll find out who's responsible and we'll take them out and flog them. And and she's like, well, I didn't ask for that. And that's the scene. But then he goes to the basement and you see all his tech, which I assume is still in the theatrical cut because it's important for the plot.
Yep.
But yeah, so they go there. They end up confronting him, and it all results in him actually killing himself because that's part of his whole plan. Is he wants to become like the master ghost, effectively.
Yeah, but they think they outsmarted him or like defeated him because he only kills himself once they say the police is on the way. So they're like, oh, all right, he just didn't want to live up to it.
Yeah,
and so
course.
they just
Before they go in though, the receptionist of the hotel is our second cameo. Yep. Janine is here, and
she's fine.
Yeah, she's good. I don't have much to really say about that. Like, I think the Bill Murray character was more annoying. This is just like this is a more played straight role, so it's just kind of there and fine.
Yep. So they shut it down. They get all the police to show up, and then the mayor's assistant shows up saying, hey, great job, you saved the city, but we still got to do that discrediting thing, so we're gonna fake arrest you now. Bye.
Question: next time we see them when they're out in the street, did the theatrical cut have Kristen Wiig going to punch a guy who was trying to like film her and ask her about being a ghost girl and her past?
No, they don't even make it out to the street. It's just hard cuts as soon as they're arrested.
Well, it is a hard cut. It's not like outside this building. It's like some time later after they've been fake arrested. They're just kind of walking down a street, and someone comes up and tries to film. Say, "Hey, you're a bunch of hucksters. You've made up a ghost when you were a kid. You know, I looked into your backstory, ghost girl." And she turns around and tries to like hit him, and they all have to kind of hold her back. So,
yep, none of that. Yeah, no idea what you're talking about.
I figured that was because that was like the first thing, honestly, that I kind of went, oh, that feels. I don't remember this at all. I think they added this.
Yeah. So after that point, we see that the guy that killed himself actually was reading one of their books. He ordered one of the copies off Amazon, and Kristen Wiig is
so
like,
it's their fault. It's their fault.
Yeah,
he's doing this.
100% their fault. She's leafing through his books and sees all of these drawings that he did inside of it of like him being massive and like stomping over the city, and it says open the barrier, and it seems to imply that he did plan his death. That was all part of his master plan there. So then we cut to the possession of Melissa McCarthy.
Yes, but by him. It's his ghost.
Yes.
Goes to her place. We get an extended sequence where she's vomiting slime all over the bathroom.
Didn't get that.
Oh, that was added. Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, that was like the process of being possessed. She coughed up some slime, and you actually hear him talk to her, like his voice, where he's like, oh, this is actually more disgusting than I thought it'd be. Apologies for that. But then she just keeps like vomiting slime everywhere, and then eventually she walks out, and I'm sure that's where the theatrical cut more or less picks up.
Pretty much.
Can I just say how unfunny I thought the power of pain compels you is? Like I was doing nothing for me. It's such a shitty reference. It's basically just if I yell the thing, it'll be funnier. So it's
not even if you yell the thing. It's you yell a different version of the thing.
And can I just say, right, so we're quite late in the movie at this point. We have glossed over every time they have danced. But I really want to emphasize there's a scene where Kate McKinnon starts doing lots of funky dancing where she's holding blowtorches and stuff, right? That's like one of the first ones. After their first success, it cuts to them all dancing, and this is where Kristen Wiig tries to dance with Hemsworth for a moment at the end of it, but they're all dancing together. Again, just more dancing. The one that I think you probably didn't get is that McCarthy, there's a photo of them in high school, and they're in like black turtlenecks, and it's like, hey, they were going to do like a performance about the paranormal at their school. I don't know if it was like a science project or a presentation or a talent show. I can't remember what the specifics were. But then Leslie Jones says, oh, I wish I could have seen that. And McCarthy's like, oh, I've got the music. And she goes off and turns it on. And next thing you know, her and Wiig are both wearing black tops, and they're doing their kind of like dance as they're talking about the paranormal. And this was the point where I was losing my goddamn mind.
I was going to say, like, as you describe all these scenes I didn't see, up until this point, I say, oh, God, that sounds, why are you even bothering telling me about this? This feels, I just don't even want to hear about it. This is the first time you're describing a scene where I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, Pete. That sounds bad. That sounds really bad.
So that's just another 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. But yeah, so with her being possessed, they get into a fight. He tries to kill them through Melissa McCarthy's body, and then she gets the ghost slapped out of her. The ghost flies around for a little bit and ends up possessing Kevin.
Which, hold on, pause. Yes.
Okay. Yep.
For some reason, right before this scene, he all of a sudden really wants to be a Ghostbuster.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Like, why? Where did this come from?
And the reason why it particularly sticks out to me is that when he's standing outside before he's possessed, he's made himself a Ghostbusters motorbike, right? There's a Ghostbusters logo on the motorbike. Like that, he's going to be the ancillary fifth member who rides the motorbike.
Yep.
He gets, and the reason why it stuck out to me is that for the first time in the movie, he shows a different, like, emotion, because right before he gets, because this is before he's possessed, just before it goes into him, he gets a little angry and says, "I'm going to be a Ghostbuster, damn it, whether you like it or not." And I'm like, that's weird that he's getting angry about this. But then he gets possessed, and it doesn't really matter because now he's not him anymore. Now he's the bad guy in Hemsworth's body, which is where he is for most of the rest of the movie. So,
yeah, no, it came out of nowhere. It went nowhere. I don't understand what the point of this scene was. It feels to me like there must have been a deleted subplot somewhere in there that neither of us got.
Yeah. So they suit up and go out, but it's only the three of them. Kristen Wiig tried to go to the mayor because she found, in the book all the drawings and all that.
Yep.
When she's trying to get back to the others, she has our next cameo, which is the cab driver is Dan Aykroyd. And she's like, "Hey, I need to go to Chinatown." And he's like, "That's a bit further south than I was willing to go." And it all just builds up to him saying, "Look, I don't drive to Chinatown, I don't deal with cooks, and I ain't afraid of no ghosts." And then he drives off.
Honestly, after Bill Murray's thing, I didn't hate it. Like, it was quick, it was done with, it was pointless, but...
It was quick.
You know what? Perfect Ghostbusters 2 quote. Short, but pointless.
So I don't really have any much to add about that.
No, yeah. So bad guy. He goes back. He knocks out some police officers who are guarding his old lab thing, and then he just starts back up his machine. And now there are ghosts all over New York.
Yeah, it's a little bit later, but we've not had enough dancing, so he's going to possess like an entire group of people and make them all the cops and the agents. They all start dancing for him.
Okay. You got the dance scene there.
Yes.
I did not.
What do you mean?
But I didn't. There was no dancing. Here's what happened exactly. So all the cops and stuff are converging on the hotel. Chris Hemsworth descends from the heavens like God himself, and then he does the mask thing where he just is able to control everybody else's bodies. But all he does is force them into like the starting pose with like one arm raised up and their legs spread apart. But they never move from that pose by the time the Ghostbusters get to them.
They end that way, but they did dance for a bit first. They sort of and I think the reason why I didn't think this was added is because you see a little bit of it in the credits. You can see like some of him dancing in the credits at that point.
Maybe I got significantly more, but the entirety of the credits to like maybe the 2/3 point was just the dance scene playing in the background.
Yeah, so I mean, I imagine not all of it's in the extended cut, but there is definitely some dancing before they all freeze, for sure.
Yep.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, so basically the three of them are in the car. The car gets stolen when they encounter Slimer. Slimer's here. He steals the car, drives it off with it, and then... So there's ghosts all over the place at this point, right? Let's make that clear. The city's been overrun with ghosts, just like the first movie, because of this machine being on, and all the ghosts are coming out of the delay lines and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
They see a ghost version of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and they do a whole thing where one of them makes eye contact, so all these big ghost balloons start coming towards them, and they start firing their proton packs, which like starts bursting the ghost bubbles, effectively, right?
Yep.
But the last one doesn't burst. So we get a reveal. The balloon in front pops, and then what's behind it? A giant balloon of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Look, if you didn't want to... like, either make a Ghostbusters movie or it's just this weird thing where we're doing something new, so we're doing a reboot, but you're still just referencing everything.
Yeah.
Even the fact that Hemsworth is possessed is basically their take on like the Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver getting possessed in the original.
You know how, I mean, maybe you don't come across these videos like I do, but you know how sometimes on YouTube there's like a video posted from a theater and it's like the midnight premiere of whatever popular franchise movie, and it's like the audience reaction to that scene.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, let's see how big the audience pops off for whenever that character's revealed or that thing is said.
I remember for Avengers Endgame, everyone did it for the portals scene. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This feels like a movie that was solely made so that someone could sit in the theater recording the audience and it would be nothing but that scenes. Where it's like, oh, let's see how the audience reacts when Bill Murray shows up, and then Dan Aykroyd, and then Slimer, and then the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and then it's just all of them, all rapid fire, one after another.
The quickest way I can describe this is it's a series of cheap pops. So
yeah,
it's a wrestling term, right, where you basically just get a little cheer because you say, hey, I'm in Kentucky, and because it's Kentucky, like, yeah, I said where we're from, so they give it a cheer, right? That's what this is. It's not earning
no one's
you
ever
to
cheered for Kentucky.
It's not earning you to care about the plot it's doing or the characters that it's made. It's just relying on you going, hey, I recognize the thing. They did something I recognize. And it just does that repeatedly, which is wild because this is meant to be the one that's not the nostalgia sequel, but it still falls into a lot of the same problems, bizarrely.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so they're trapped under the big Marshmallow Man balloon, and this is when Kristen Wiig makes her sort of heroic entrance because she pops it with the knife that Kate McKinnon gave her earlier. And it's like, hey, I'm going to walk in with a proton pack, you know, the over my shoulder, and all right, let's go and save the day. Which leads to is meant to be the big sort of like action scene of the movie where they're all pulling out the different gadgets they've got and like just taking out ghosts. But again, as we said earlier, they're not trapping any ghosts here. They're just firing at them until they disappear, which is kind of...
Yeah, so there's two things about this scene that I wanted to talk about. The first one is the most minor point, which is as we get to what I'm just going to call the green screen stage. It's supposed to be Times Square, but it's the green screen stage. We get this like swooping shot of this big, I don't know, long-legged ghost that's able to like summon other ghosts. Yeah, it's his whole thing. There is a sign off to the side of one of the billboards that literally says, "That's a big," and then shows a Twinkie.
I didn't even notice that. I was too preoccupied. I was too preoccupied with a giant sign that's just the Blu-ray disc logo, which I thought was a weird advertisement.
See, that's where it got you. What got me was I didn't recognize it until I literally have it paused on screen right now, because on the other side of the screen, under the Blu-ray logo, is another goddamn Papa John's. Son of a bitch.
Do you know what's so funny about the Blu-ray logo, though, is that it's weird to me that in 2016, you're advertising just the Blu-ray logo. I feel like at this point, I just like... I know Sony, obviously, it's their patent. They own Blu-ray as a format. But it's weird to just have that and nothing else. Like, you'd think it'd be like Blu-ray and then something like maybe a player and say, get your movies and all, high definition, but like, just the logo, they've got it up there like it's the Batman logo. Like, everyone just understands it and knows what it is. I don't know, it's weird.
When did the war settle on that?
2008!
Yeah, no, that's way too early. Bad move.
HD DVD by somewhere in 2008 at the latest. That is when the war was over. Blu-ray won. This was 8 years later.
Yeah, that's too late. You need to do something else there, Sony. But no, the other thing that I want to do is, again, this scene. It's such, as you were saying, it's like a cheap pop sort of thing. The first three things we get is, I believe it's Melissa McCarthy uses the grenade, and it's for a comedic beat. But again, they're not trapping the ghosts. They're just knocking them away. You get Leslie Jones, who uses I think it's like a shotgun, honestly, that they like introduce just off screen. That's there. We get the shredder, I think, is used as well. All of these are interesting scenes, but the cheapest pop of all, I think, is Kate McKinnon. Who,
the dual pistols.
The dual pistols, but not just the dual pistols. the fact that the dual pistols pop out and then she goes slow motion with the big brassy remake of the Ghostbusters theme. So it's all meant to be this huge epic swirling score that really gets the audience pumping. And I'm not going to lie, on like an emotional level, I heard that score sound and I was like, that sounds amazing.
Don't get me wrong. I am a mark for big epic orchestral versions of things like this. I on a music level, I kind of pop for it a little bit, but this moment has not earned the epic slow-mo moment. It's not like, this isn't like, oh, the last minute she's jumping in and saving the day. She's just the last one to do stuff during a scene where they're all doing stuff. If anything, if you'd given this, I mean, it still wouldn't have, but they've not earned me to care enough about what's going on, admittedly, but it would have made more sense if maybe Kristen Wiig sort of did this as she was coming in to save the rest of them, because it's like, hey, you know, last minute save by like the one last hero who might, you know, and that's where you sort of do the epic da-na, 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 right? But yeah, so it's oddly placed where it is, but I do appreciate just the idea of like doing that in the score, you know, using part of that theme.
Yeah. No, like I could listen to that remake all day, but pairing it with that visual, I was just like, I'm so conflicted. I don't care at all about that, but if I close my eyes, I feel like something good's happening.
I'm sure there's several extended versions of the epic cover on YouTube. Go and listen to them. You'll be fine. That's all you need.
So they finally take out the big stilt ghost because whatever, and then they make their way to the hotel where the center of the portal is, and that's where Chris Hemsworth is just like dancing around, and finally the bad guy says, all right, I'll give him back, and he just lets Chris Hemsworth go. And as they try to trap and like get him, his spirit, he pulls the choose the form of your destroyer bit. But like
kinda, yeah.
Not.
Well,
yeah.
He basically he turns himself into the Ghostbusters logo. But then the ghost from the logo starts to get bigger, so he becomes Stay Puft size, and that's kind of your equivalent in this movie.
Yeah, and he's like all evil looking. He's got like jagged teeth and stuff like that.
Yeah, he looks kind of like I want to say there's a character from Nightmare Before Christmas that this reminded me of.
It is Oogie Boogie. That is exactly who it is, because I thought the same exact thing.
And I don't even like that movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I thought of it, so. There you go. So yeah, honestly, it's very unfulfilling. Obviously, there's a lot of them blasting it and whatnot, but ultimately, like, it's basically just crossed the streams again. Which, by the way, they sort of like talk around it but eventually Kristen Wiig actually says total platonic reversal or whatever the line is, and I'm like, okay, you finally said the exact thing they said in the first movie, but the one little twist on it is that it's actually the top of the car that's the really dangerous part. So, like, that's the thing we're going to like wait until Slimer conveniently drives the car into the portal.
With his girlfriend?
Yeah, there's Lady Slimer.
The hell is that?
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. It's another tiny cell.
But yeah, they zap the top of the car as it goes into the portal, and that's enough to suck up all the ghosts in the city. Except maybe the big one. They have to zap him in the groin in order to get him to fall into the portal. Why does the
ghost have why is that a weak spot in a ghost? It's not physical.
Don't know.
He doesn't have balls.
So yeah, that's happening. So as big ghost guy's finally falling through the portal, he ends up grabbing Melissa McCarthy and dragging her in with. And as the portal starts closing, Kristen Wiig gets like a little winch around her waist and says, "I'm coming for you," and jumps into the portal.
I thought, yay, happy ending. but then
they're both dead.
Well, I was thinking just McCarthy, but yeah, then she jumped in to save her. Yeah. Which is fine, but obviously they play that like, no, I'm not leaving you again. I'm going to be here for you. But because they've not really played that plot most of the movie, they've just kind of forgotten about it. It just did not hit at all.
I was actually fully expecting there to be a scene in the extended cut after they get belittled at the hotel and like fake arrested, where Kristen Wiig just blows up at McCarthy and says like, no, I'm not going to not be believed anymore. Like, I'm not going to keep doing this if no one's going to believe me.
I agree. It would make sense, especially with the big heroic return, if she quit the team and that was her like coming back.
Yeah.
That would make total sense. But she doesn't. She just sort of like goes off to sulk because she's in a bad mood. But she's not left the team. She just happens to be separate at that point when everything kicks off. Yeah, like we're actually just making simple suggestions that would maybe not fix the whole thing, but would definitely improve it. Would definitely make the plot make more sense, and would have a straight through line for what the character arc is. Because the character arc as it is feels very, very missing. It's like you can kind of see the start and end of it, what it was supposed to be, but it just, the actual arc that's supposed to be in the middle is just kind of missing. It's like one of the ghosts is like walk through the bridge and the arc is just like, broken.
Exactly. So she dives into the portal, and it seems like the portal closes up after her, but we see them go through whatever you want to call it, the ghost zone, I guess. The
ghost
ethereal
hole.
Plane. Yeah.
You have to play the demon toll to get into that ghost hole.
Ghost hole. Perfect. So she zaps the big bad guy's arm to free Melissa McCarthy. She grabs hold of her, says the thing of, "Oh yeah, I'm never going to leave you again." And then all of a sudden they start getting yanked out from the other side. And then their hair turns white.
For reasons I thought.
It literally doesn't matter, to the point where in the post-credit scene they start dyeing it as close as they can back to the original colors. So like I really don't understand what this was.
I got an extra scene before the credits then.
Oh, lucky you.
Because they were back to the normal hair color in the last scene anyway. So I think the credit scene was just to explain that they dyed it for you.
All right. Yeah.
Because the final scene with Ernie Hudson, like they all had the regular hair in that scene.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, no, I assume this bit was added, but when they're talking to Kevin outside and he's eating a sandwich, he's like, "Hey, I was looking for you, but hey, we saved the day, didn't we? All 5 of us Ghostbusters saved the day." And they're like, "Wait, where did you get a sandwich?" He's like, "Well, when I was looking for you, I went into that deli over there." It's like, "Wait, we were like saving the city and you went to the deli?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I assume this next part was because I did not remember it at all, where one of them grabs his sandwich and throws it away. And he's left there standing, and he just sort of looks over off camera and says, "Hey, can I have my sandwich back?" And it just flies in off camera as if a stranger has tossed him his sandwich back. And then someone I'm not done. Someone grabs his sandwich again, throws it away, and then it says, "Hey, can I have that beverage?" And someone throws him a bottle of water. And then it says, "Also a muffin." And then Kate McKinnon says, "Wait, are you like magic?" And then the scene ends.
All right, so we got up to, "Can I have that sandwich back?"
Okay.
That was familiar. Everything after that, I swear to God, you're just making shit up.
Wait, did the sandwich come back in, though, or did they just say that
the
line?
Sandwich did come back in.
Okay. All right. Well, it kept going. And it was...
I'm so sorry.
It was more stupid, right?
Yeah.
The scene I was saying that they added, though, and this stuck out to me, is just based on what you just said, is they're sitting in like a bar or a restaurant or whatever, chatting.
Oh no, I got that.
But they have a whole conversation about dyeing their hair and about what hair dye was. So
no, I got that scene, but what I'm saying is that why did we bother with their hair being white in the first place if they were just immediately going to dye it back?
I just assume you didn't get that because you sort of said it as if the scene in the credits explained that they dyed their hair, but they already explained that in the scene. Sorry, it was just the way you said it. That's why I thought you didn't get it. But and there's just a bunch of jokes about how our head's too ginger, which, I mean, okay, I like to make fun of ginger people, so I can get on board, but, like, it's not really that funny.
Yeah, we got a whole sequence where Kate McKinnon, like, opens up and is actually genuine in a very awkward way.
Oh, yeah, I actually have friends now. I never thought I would.
Wow, it's almost like she had a plot at some point in this movie, but we never got to see it.
Yeah, she never, and it's not even like a big deal because it's not like Egon has a lot of plot in the original movie. You know, the movie definitely revolves around some of them more than others. That's okay, but to pretend that, I don't know, it feels like we're pretending that she did have more of a plot here, and you know, she didn't. Like, we never got the sense that she was lonely before, or even hinted at it. It's kind of strange. I don't know. It'd
be like if Leslie Jones just stood up in the same scene and be like, "And by the way, guys, I finally paid off my surgery," and everyone's like, "What are you talking about? That wasn't even a thing. We weren't even doing that."
She definitely had breast cancer. Yeah, but she's going to be fine.
Yeah, perfect. And then the mayor's assistant shows up and basically says, "Okay, look, we're still going to deny that you guys are doing anything good, but we're going to fully fund you so that you can protect the city from ghosts."
Hence,
under the radar.
The fire station, and the movie ends with Winston showing up. Well, he's not really Winston, but like Ernie Hudson shows up. and says, "Where's
Leslie
my,
Jones' uncle.
yeah, where's my hearse? Where's my hearse? Damn it!" And the movie just kind of like I guess it's because the movie's not really over because there's so many scenes that take place as the credits are playing that it's not really the end. But the way it cuts to the first credit, I was like, that was the moment you're ending on, because it was like a nothing moment. But then you keep getting scenes which are Sigourney Weaver's cameo, where she's actually the mentor to Holtzman, Kate McKinnon's character, and she's also a cookie scientist. That's her thing. Okay.
We get the final Chekhov's gun on that wonton soup now being 100% wonton and no soup.
Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. I couldn't contain my laughter at that joke.
Yep.
But it all bubbles up to a sweet scene where they go up on the roof and see that like people in the city have like turned their lights on, so it says, New York loves the Ghostbusters and things like that. It's meant to be a Spider-Man moment where the city loves them, the city's behind them. And that's where it ends, barring the final post-credit scene, which I kind of already said it even before we get into spoilers, but it's basically just they're listening. Leslie Jones is listening to some tape, and she's like, "Hey guys, there's something weird on this. What's Zool?" Sequel bait.
Yeah.
And a thud was had throughout the land.
I like to imagine that nobody ever actually saw that scene. Like everyone just left the theater before that scene even happened.
You're lucky I even did, because I just sort of skipped, you can do like sort of 10 seconds or ahead or whatever. I just kept 10 seconds in ahead just to see if there was something, and I was like, oh, there is a scene. I'll give it a check then.
See, I knew there was a scene at the end because I was already browsing the IMDb trivia at that point. But for me, I didn't want to like go too far because the way the YouTube's rental system works, I would have had to fast forward through the whole movie if I overshot it. So I didn't want to do that. So I was doing it very slowly, but all I kept on doing was entering right in the middle of Fall Out Boy's cover of that song. And I was like, God damn it, stop. I'm done with this.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I feel like in 2016, I tried to like be nice to it. And maybe it's because like the negative side of like the reaction was so toxic that it was just like impossible to like not try and give it as much of a benefit of a doubt as you could. But honestly, between having just time to reflect on it and come at it a bit more fresh, but also watching the originals 2 movies so close to it, the comedy in this is just so different and certainly not to my taste. I would argue it's bad if you're someone who likes this style of comedy. But let's be clear here. This is this type of comedy that's in most Melissa McCarthy movies, and I don't like any of them. Like, every one I've seen, I have not liked. So I fundamentally just don't like this. I guess the one positive I can say, to come back to what Tim said that I mentioned earlier, is that I guess at least this one is trying to be a comedy, which I don't think the next one really is. I'm not saying there's nothing in it that's meant to be funny, but it's not like this constant comedy like the original movie is. And I think this one is trying to be a comedy, but it's trying to be a very different genre of comedy from what the original was. Which, if there's one thing I want, if they're going to, I don't think they should make any more. I'm happy to never have another one, to be honest. But if they're going to make a Ghostbusters movie, the one thing that I would want to come back from the original at the top of the list would be the witty style sense of humor. Everything else is kind of optional to a point. I mean, there's always going to be the logo, there's always going to be the car, sure, I get that, but that's the important thing. I feel like this is something that keeps coming up, is we keep getting these nostalgia sequels and movies that are adapted on things like the Mario movie that we talked about last year, is that they seem to think referencing all the details of like the logos, the props, the events is what matters, when the actual important thing is why you felt the way you did, why the story made you feel a way in the first place. It's the soul of the movie that is you should be trying to recreate the feeling of. All of the incidental items that are just going to make people pop are just a list of things. You can have them in there too. It's not like they'll detract if the movie's otherwise good and has a good witty sense of humor, if there's a good story. If it has those things, I'm not going to be like, oh, I can't believe they brought all these other things back as well. It's fine. But when that's what you're relying on, and they're clearly designed to be moments that people are going to clap, it's like, hey, we saw Janine. Like, it just, no, it's shallow, it's hollow, and it's largely very, very unfunny, and that's maybe its biggest sin.
Yeah. In terms of the references, I feel like it is basically solely made for the first time viewing. Like, you can go through it and you're like, oh, hey, look, they did that thing. If you weren't aware of it being in there, you're like, wow, awesome, cool, glad that's there. But that's never going to hit the same on any subsequent viewing.
Yeah, that is very true. That is 100% true. The Resident Evil movie that came out last, well, 3 years ago now, actually.
Yeah.
But that was like a series of references. It wasn't a good movie, but I kind of enjoyed the viewing just to be like, you know, as a Resident Evil fan, all those previous movies were like torture because they were just terrible and just didn't respect the games. Right. The new movie, Welcome to Raccoon City, is a pretty bad movie that squeezes too much in, but it at least felt nice to be kind of like pandered to, because it was like, hey,
right, exactly.
here's things you recognize. So I got something out of it, but I admit that if I watch it again, it will just be trash. Mm-hmm. I think what that makes me think of with this is that this came out relatively early in the nostalgia wave. Obviously, Force Awakens had already come out. This is the same year as Jurassic World, I think. But it was early on. I think what's interesting now that we're at Afterlife, because I was thinking this when the trailer for Beverly Hills Cop 4 came out, because Netflix are doing Beverly Hills Cop 4, is I had this feeling watching that trailer of like, I think this has actually missed the nostalgia boat. I feel like we're actually coming out of that era now of like these movies being made in the way they are, and it felt like this now feels like almost lame that they're even trying to do this, and that's it's I don't know, it's a weird feeling.
I mean, this is 2016, we're in 2024 now. It's almost a full decade after the fact. Like, yeah, no, I think there is a wave to these things, and so many people were so caught up in like rights issues and stuff like that they were just missed the boat. So anything we get from this point on, I'm gonna go ahead and say it needs to stand on its own 2 feet, because if it's just trying to cash in, there's no way it's gonna work out.
Yeah, and I do also wonder if like it feels even worse now, because all these references, that a lot of them felt weird at the time because it was, again, this weird that they're not actually the characters from the original movie. They're kind of these weird meta references. But I wonder if it feels even worse now, because now, I mean, I know I am just sick to death of these movies being nothing but references to the old movies, you know?
Yeah, I also wonder, like, obviously a bunch of cast members from like Bridesmaids showed up, and Bridesmaids, like it or hate it, it did really, really well. Like, it did a great job at the theaters and then on home media. But I wonder if this is also one of those things where you get enough exposure to, like, Melissa McCarthy in different roles, and you kind of get sick of her to an extent, where you kind of get the gist of, like, who she is as an actress. The same sort of way of, like, you know, you can watch through a whole bunch of, like, a certain comedian who's acting. One that I would throw out there is, say, like, Jim Carrey. You can kind of get Jim Carrey's sketch. Maybe you don't get sick of him. Maybe you think his humor's fine. I'm personally more in that boat than not. But there is, like, if you watch enough of Jim Carrey comedies in a row, at a certain point, you're like, okay, I get it. I don't need this anymore. I understand the gist of it, you know?
Yeah. I think that's fair. So somehow we actually crossed the 2-hour mark here. I didn't even realize we'd been going that long. So
woo. Let's keep going. Beat the extended cut.
I mean, by the time the outro's done, we probably will have.
Yeah.
What are you rating?
God, I don't know, man.
Ghostbusters 2016.
Why you gotta do this to me? I mean, I think
if only you could have predicted that on episode 78 or whatever we're on, that I would ask the question I ask at the end of every single episode.
It's always a shock. I always think maybe this is the time that we're gonna shift it up. No, obviously I really like the original Ghostbusters. Second one I had my faults with, but I still thought it was a good movie overall. This one, I can't get into it. I don't feel like there's really anything to latch on to from it. Obviously, if you are watching it for the first time and you're a huge Ghostbusters fan, you can get that little bit of a, like you said, a cheap pop, the pandering. It may work for you, but I cannot imagine any situation where I want to go back and watch this movie again. So all in all, I think ratings-wise, special effects are all right. Dialogue is awful. I think it's going to even out to probably be like 3.5. I can't in good faith give it above a 5 for sure. So 3.5 is where I'm coming down at.
Oh yeah, I think 5 was definitely the ceiling when I was thinking about this watching it. But you know, obviously we talk about the movie. you kind of like straighten out some of your feelings. It very much is this weird stepchild now of the franchise, especially now that it's continuing with this sort of like nostalgia continuity that it's got.
I wonder when they release box sets in the future if this is going to be a part of it.
It's funny actually because on iTunes there's a bundle that has all 4, but there's also a bundle that's 1, 2, and Afterlife. So they know full well that there's going to be a lot of people who just don't want this one.
Yeah.
So, it's tough. I don't think it's quite because 3.5 to me is saying you're inching onto extra reels territory, and I don't think it's quite there. It's very much a product of its time, in that it feels very much a lot like those early to mid 2010s comedies that I don't like. But I think I'm going to shoot it an even 4 out of 10.
Okay. I'm not going to disagree. I'm honestly, once it reaches that low of a score, it's just kind of up to gut feeling for me. Yeah, I can't even like justify it in any real meaningful way. It's just where it feels like it sits.
Yeah, I hope we've done a good job of explaining why it doesn't work, at least for us, if not in general. So yeah, as far as making the cut goes, it just doesn't.
Nah, for sure. The question is though, cut your losses or cut from the collection? I don't think it cuts deep. I think that is a bit too harsh on it.
I don't think it's a cut your losses type thing. I think it's just it just doesn't.
I mean, I don't know. Like I can't imagine a situation where I would suggest somebody watches this movie. Like I don't think it's worth checking out in the first place, honestly. It just seems like a pass and don't worry about it sort of, especially with the idea that there are actual in continuity sequels to the first two. Like this, like you said, it feels like a stepchild. I'm okay with that.
All right, I'm happy to say cut your losses. I can live with that.
All right, so be it. With that.
So, all right, well, we have Ghostbusters Afterlife next week. So we'll see how that is. I'll be curious to hear David's thoughts, given that you've not seen it before. But we'll have a look at that. But yeah, I mentioned at the start of the show, we do some bonus things over at Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. We have 2 monthly bonus shows that me and David specifically do. We have the Criterion Cut, which is a monthly review of a Criterion Collection movie. And at the $5 and up tier, we have the Extra Reel Show, which is where we review some of the worst things of all time. Sometimes so bad they're amazing, but not always. It kind of depends. I mentioned Mac and Me was a recent episode of that, so bunch of fun there. So you can get those over at Patreon. You also get bonuses for other shows from MailFuzz Movies, like you get a bonus Screams After Midnight from me and Tim, stuff like that. So if you're interested in supporting the show and help keeping all the content coming, you can get some extra things, and you can go check that out. But otherwise, I guess that's us. That's been the show. It's been a long one, and I am going to go and have some dinner. So
same. I'm going to eat some Papa John's.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Well, not really this time, but it's a pleasure to hopefully entertain you. It's not been a pleasure to watch this movie. So thank you for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have Papa John's. Welcome everyone to Comics. Wait, no, that's the wrong show. 5. You can tell I'm tired. 5, 4, 3,